Hello, I'm here with Carson HEADY from Missouri. How are you, Carson?
Doing well, Matt. How about yourself?
Excellent. It's good to have you on this little call this morning. All right, so Carson is a published author of 2 books, a very successful sales leader, and a top performer with a track record of consistently exceeding goals in leading departments, as well as individual performance. He is recognized for leading a $50 million call center operation and was #1 out of 120 sales managers company-wide. He grew the department's revenue by 413% over the 4 years that he was there. He's currently a territory manager at Microsoft and handling partner relationships with corporate accounts, with responsibility of driving revenue growth, customer satisfaction, building relationships, and growing new business. I'm very excited about this call. So Carson, let's dive right in. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your 2 books? What would be the key takeaways from those books?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. And I appreciate your time today. It's a pleasure speaking with you. And, the books have really been kind of a labor of love. It was something that I had wanted to do for a long period of time, and I had a lot of passion around writing. But, when you set out to write something, you don't want to write something that's been done a lot before. And there's a lot of sales books out there, and I'm not trying to pretend to be a sales guru or anything of that stature. I think my primary initiative was just really to share experiences and make connections through the work. And so I actually created a sales book inside of a novel around a fictional character that I created who writes the book inside the book. And so it was a little bit different than a lot of the sales books that are out there. So there was a fictional component and then also a sales book that was embedded in the book. And so as far as key takeaways, really my philosophies have always centered around people and process. And so the people, obviously, that these could be the customers that you're interacting with. They could be the people that you work with as part of a team. They can be the people that you work for. So it's anyone and everyone that you come into contact with throughout your journey. It's really all about taking care of them and then the process. I think there's a lot of focus in sales in this day and age on numbers and chasing additional widgets. And in reality, it all comes down to process. If you really focus on a process, whether it's one that is obviously it's going to evolve through time and with the changes that are going on in whatever industry you're in. But process and people have really been the fundamentals that the books are based on. And then what I call the holy sales trinity, which is the customer, the company, and you. And those are the 3 people, the 3 entities that must benefit on every transaction. If 1 or 2 of the 3 do not benefit, then it's not something that should be pursued. And I think those are really the things that I've tried to focus on throughout not only my sales career, but also in the books. I'm also wrapping up with a 3rd that I'm trying to find the time to write. Sometimes that's difficult to do, but definitely have a little bit more story to tell. But it's really been exciting, just interacting with people all around the world because of those books. Obviously, I haven't sold enough to retire, but it's been a very rewarding experience just because of the people that I've been able to meet and interact with.
Very cool, and I'm looking forward to getting those books and reading them as well. There seems to be something obstructing the view of your camera. I'm not sure if it's just a side of your finger or something like that. We can't really see you right now. There we go. That's better. Great. So how did you manage to grow the call center's department revenue by 413%?
It's a great question, and it harks back to what we were talking about a little bit before, Matt. I think a lot of focus goes into numbers and reaction, and I think the secret of getting numbers is not to dwell on the numbers. It's really to focus on the people and the process. And anytime you're coming into a new situation, I think a lot of people expect you as a manager or as a leader to make changes or implement big policies, and it's not about that. It's really about getting to know your people. It's about figuring out what makes them tick, and it's ultimately about coming up with a plan together in order to go forward. Because at the end of the day, we as leaders, as managers, we may believe that the people that work for us just hang on our every word and make changes based on our recommendations, but that's not reality. And I've also found it paramount to build a mutual respect. Being able to get in and actually do the job with them, and or spend time with them in doing their job, so you can actually see what they're dealing with. You've got to understand that first and foremost. Second, if you come into a situation, if somebody is in a role, they've earned the right to be in that role. So who am I or anyone else to come in and just start barking orders and telling them to change what they're doing? I think that can be a management misstep in a lot of situations. So I think it's paramount that you come in, you spend time with them, get to know them, but also you've got to ultimately agree on that plan together if you're going to make changes. So absolutely, any good leader is going to have recommended changes that they want their team to carry out. But if they don't believe in you, if you haven't established that foundation, just like when you're working with a customer, it's the same situation. If they don't believe in you, respect you, and they don't believe you understand their situation, they're not going to buy the change you're selling. And that's really what it comes down to, is getting to know them, what motivates them, and understand their process. Because if you want them to change, you've got to sell that change. You've got to also ensure that they fear not changing more than they would fear staying the same. And or as far as making a change. So ultimately, if you get them to understand or to admit that they are not 100% satisfied with their results, for instance, it's a lot easier to get them to quote unquote gamble those results in favor of a potentially more positive outcome. And by that, you're ultimately selling that change. You can't make them do anything in the grand scheme of things. Sure, there's a lot of managers that will lead through fear and assume that they can get their changes passed just by saying the words. But in reality, it's about getting the buy-in from your team. And ultimately, if they buy into you and you work with them rather than projecting yourself as a superior character, you will move forward together. And sure, it's also about consistency and evolution, because once you've got the foundation set, the game changes. So you've got to make sure that you're consistent with your results, which means tweaking the process where it needs, and maybe sometimes adding things in, maybe sometimes subtracting things, but also evolving to meet the changing needs of your customers and your business. So as far as that call center project as it was, there were a lot of different changes that came over the years. I mean, it was selling into bad economy at times. It was changing the products that we offered. We added things, we subtracted things, but each time it just comes down to how does this fit in the process. So I find that the easiest way to manage in those situations is to simplify the situation. Always come down to people and process. If the people are afraid of the change, then you spend time with them and you get them to understand why it's necessary, and you teach them how to endure in those types of situations. And if it's a process change, you look at, okay, what's my existing process? How do I integrate in these changes to that? And always do it as a team. And if you do that, not only you've already got their buy-in because you built that foundation. We were successful for that period of time and made that kind of jump in revenue, not by chasing a number or chasing metrics or caring about any of those types of things, but figuring out what the process was for each of those metrics. And that's why we found results. And then finally, being able to network and always look for other opportunities to improve ourselves. How can our division best be of value to other groups? Because when you're finding ways to be of value to others, you'll show up on their radar and they will look out for you if they see you contributing to them. So those were the key components of that success.
So now, as a nowadays as a top performer, I know that you have quite the experience and quite the background, and you've succeeded in performing consistently. What does a typical day look like for you now, and maybe in the past as well?
Sure, and that's a great question, because that answer does change dramatically. 10 years, I'd say it was all just caffeine and work. And nowadays it's different. I think as your priorities change in life, you seek some kind of work-life balance, and you really have to have the things and the routines that bring you some semblance of peace amidst some of the chaos. But I think what it all comes down to is the prioritization and prioritizing people and process again. So every time you come in, you always really want to set aside time to refresh and recharge. Make sure that you're looking at the day's activities and really prioritizing. I will say that there are times and there are roles that I've had where there was almost no way of staying on top of literally every single thing that you wanted or needed to accomplish in any given day. So again, it comes down to the prioritization, and sometimes it's almost making lists. It's a very similar concept to making lists. You just have to check things off one at a time as you get through them when you know that they need to get done. So I find myself really prioritizing based on people and based on revenue. If it's real revenue and it's something that needs to be dealt with and it's hot, well, let's deal with it right this second. If it's something, if I've got to go in and approve something, or look at a discount, or something that is potential real revenue, that's obviously going to show up pretty high on my list too. Making sure that customers and that your end user, or that the people working for you, are getting the things that they need to carry on. Those are first and foremost. I think it's also paramount that you're spending some time. You've got to sometimes get away and take a little bit of time to find a little peace. I like to read, and I like to at least disappear for at least half an hour a day just to read something that's going to completely take my mind away, because you've got to come in fresh and you've got to be able to manage throughout the day. And then finally, always looking for new opportunities. Even if it's just 30 minutes to an hour a day, setting aside that time, always look for new opportunities, whether it's networking, whether it's looking for new connections, whether it's going to networking events, any of those types of things. I think those are so key, because not only are we harvesting our field, we've also got to make sure we're planting the seeds for future success. And if we're not doing that, come 1 week, 1 month, 1 year down the road, what will we have to harvest? Because some of the existing crop may dry up or may change. We've got to make sure that we're consistently adding seeds to what we have. And so I think those, making a concerted effort to do those types of things in a given day, that's a typical day for me, is making sure that I've not only taken care of the things that absolutely have to get done, but furthermore, planting seed for the future so that I will have something to do in the months to come.
So it's a bit of a balancing act between the two.
Always, yes.
Who would be some of the mentors or the sales experts or geniuses that you've learned from?
Yeah, I think the most famous ones probably that would come to mind would be Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie. I think their writings are extremely inspirational. But I think as a salesperson and as a leader, I've learned the most from the people that I've been blessed to work with and for. I've had a lot of great relationships, and I think you almost become a conglomeration of those people. I think we take little bits and pieces from everybody that we come in contact with, and not everything that I say or that anybody says is going to be, necessarily a sales gospel or a leadership gospel. But if we can take those pieces and really fine tune that, make it our own, I think those have been really the parts that if Dale Carnegie and Napoleon Hill gave me the weapon and gave me the sword, it's all the little things that I've learned along the way that have helped me really brandish it and sharpen it.
My last question would be, what would be your 3 pieces of advice in terms of B2B sales? What would you have to sort of teach other people, or that would be the most valuable?
I love that question. I think number 1 is be unique. It's so, when you look at the objections that you get or the roadblocks that you run into, you're not the first person likely that's run into those types of things. And if you continue to let yourself run into those things, I think that's where the problem comes into play. I think you need to think about why you or others have not been successful in that space or in that situation, and change it up. Number 1, address your customers' concerns head on. If you already know that you're going to be drilled on price, or you already know that your customers are going to ignore an email or a voicemail, or you know that customer has a lot of questions, be prepared for that reception and plan accordingly. I can't tell you how many times I've worked in situations where people will call, have the same routine, have the exact same introductory speech that gets ignored every time. You've got to change that. If you see that it's being ignored, you've got to quickly address it and make the alteration. But I think being unique and standing out is paramount to that process. Number 2, I would say endure and don't react. This is definitely something I've learned as I've aged and become a little bit more seasoned in the selling game, because things are going to change all the time, and you're not always going to agree with those changes. But a lot of your value is not necessarily in your results, but in your consistency and in your dependability. I've seen so many people that have come along and had some immediate sales success, and then they're like, hey, well, where's my promotion? But it doesn't work like that.
You've got to stay the course, and you've got to make sure that you're there for numerous changes. I've seen multiple mergers, and I've seen buyouts, and I've been in situations where we've had massive layoffs, and I've been laid off myself. So there's a lot of different things that can change that you have zero control over. So I think finding the way to control what you can control and being able to accept that is very, very important. You've got to be able to weather the changes and the rejections and all the little idiosyncrasies that come along with your role. And then finally, every day is a brand new day. So it doesn't matter if you had an awful day yesterday. We've all had them, but it's gone. And if you dwell on it, it's going to keep you from following through on your process, and it's going to prevent you from success today because you won't be doing the things that will plant the seed for future success. So I think those are the top 3 things for B2B sales. Having a good head about you, being unique, standing apart from what everybody else is doing, because that's what's going to get you exemplary results. I say all the time, if you're performing status quo and you're doing the same things that average folks are doing, you're going to be average, you're going to be status quo. And is that what you really want with your results? Enduring and not reacting, being consistent and dependable, and then finally taking every single day at a time, every opportunity at a time. I saw that, I think my favorite movie that came out last year was Creed, and it was a great message. One punch at a time, one round at a time. We've got to make sure that we're taking each step as it comes, and that we're controlling what we can control in those circumstances. And if you do that, if you follow that process and you care about the people that you're engaging with and always look for ways to add value, you'll be successful. You'll never have to worry about a number. You'll be successful.
Wow, that was extremely valuable. I think you've given us a lot to think about. And like I said, I'm going to watch this video multiple times and learn as much as I can from you. Carson, it's been an absolute pleasure. I don't want to take more of your time. This has been, again, very, very valuable for me, and I'm sure for the people watching this as well. So thank you so much for your time, and have a great day.
I appreciate it, Matt. It was an absolute pleasure for me, and would love to talk to you anytime. So take care, and thanks for the opportunity.
Sounds good. Ciao.
Yep.
Bye.